This is an 86 or so Marshall JCM 800. And this was in here earlier this year, and I recapped it and did a few little gain tweaks. But the owner at the time said that he loved the sound, and so I didn't do anything dramatic. It's come back. Came back for two reasons. Number one, it was losing power. And this brown factory wire here had broken. It was a solid core wire and it broke. I reconnected that, everything's fine. I'm probably going to replace that solid core wire with some stranded just so that won't happen again, though it'd probably be decades before that could vibrate enough to break again. But the solid wire itself just snapped right here. The other issue, and let's look at how he's using the amp. He's been running the treble really low, the presence off, and rolling the tone down on his guitar. Otherwise, it's just way too bright. Now, someone previously had removed the 470 picofarad across the 470K between this input jack and the preamp gain, but they left the 1000 picofarad, which is across lugs 2 and 3, wiper to input of the preamp gain pot. And that is a recipe for a really harsh sound. So I'm going to remove this cap and let the owner hear it as it is now, with this cap removed, and with this cap removed and this cap restored, and with both caps in place, which is how his 80 JCM 800 is, which he likes the sound of. Personally, I find this cap to be what makes these things painfully bright. But rather than snip it like someone did on this old C4, I'm going to lift the board and desolder it and try to leave one end connected so the original cap's still on the amp. And I should be able to press it down to make contact just for a demonstration of what it sounds like with and without it. And I will at least temporarily do much the same with C4. I'll probably have C4 connected with longer leads in case the owner decides he likes it better without it. But we get the amp prep for that, so I've got to remove all these knobs and stuff so the board is free, so I have access, so I can properly remove C5, partially at least, and get the old leads out of C4. Okay, I've got everything prepped, and I'm going to keep the master volume kind of low on this so we don't kill the lav mic. Now this is with the 1000 picofarad bright cap across the volume pot, without the 470 picofarad cap across the the 470K resistor head of the volume pot. So this is as the amp came in where he complained it was bright, and I've got the treble down at like 1 and the presence off like he was using it. So he was going for kind of a creamy sound. Now if I bring the presence up to like 10 o'clock and bring the treble up to noon, you hear that gets really bright. So let me lift that 1000 picofarad bright cap real quick, and we'll compare it without it. Same setting there. I removed one leg of it and left it long so I could reach that lug with the iron to lift it. Just gonna heat that up, lift right out. All right, so it is connected to the board on one side, but is not in circuit. And that same setting. Tuning's a little bit out. Let me check that real quick. Okay, I got the tuning sorted out. So the amp is much brighter than he was originally running it, but it's not painfully bright the way it was with the trebled bright cap on before. If I add in this cap ahead of that volume pot, let me do that real quick. That's with the presence at 10 o'clock and the treble at noon. And that's kind of the sound of this model. And to get that smoother sound like the owner was doing, let's turn the treble down to like 10 o'clock and the presence down to about 9 o'clock. I really think that the owner is going to prefer it without either bright cap. So let me lift that cap I just connected. So this is with the 1000 picofarad cap lifted, but still physically in place on the board in case someone wants the original cap later. And this 470 is disconnected, and I will remove it from the amp because it is a new part. So even with the treble at noon and the presence at 10 o'clock, the amp is still fairly smooth. And the more you increase the preamp gain, the more that'll smooth out. You can turn the treble down a little bit, but it doesn't have to be drastic. And I'm sure the owner won't have to roll the tone down on his guitar. So this brings us to the other issue this amp has that the owner did not mention, that it did not have before, last time I had this amp in, and that is a lot of hum coming from V1. Some of it there, and you can hear it even with the volume off. It's really noticeable if I turn the volume up. So let's see what preamp tube we have in here. Okay, it's got a Groove Tubes ECC 83, which is pretty much the same thing, I believe, as a JJ. Let's pop in a different tube and see if that behavior changes. Sometimes it goes away based on different preamp tubes, and sometimes in Marshalls, that noise floor remains no matter what you use, unless you use an old, say, RCA or Mullard from the 60s, but you shouldn't need to use a $200-300 preamp tube to make an amp work. What it is a flaw in the JCM 800 design that they got away with based on the tubes that were available in the late 70s and 80s. That it's harder to get away with current production tubes. And the fix for that is to do an elevated DC reference for the heaters, which is what I did in that 1980 2204 the other day. I may be doing the same thing here. I just put in a Mullard 12AX7 and a CV4004 actually. Let's see if the hum's still there. All right, all that hum is gone. So he had a bad Groove Tubes JJ. So I will get him his own shiny new tube for this amp. Of interest to me, and maybe to some of you, this same owner has both this 86 2204, the 50-watt Mark II lead horizontal input JCM 800. So the same owner owns this amp as owns that 1980 vertical input 2204 50-watt master volume lead 2, Mark II. And on the 80, he likes having both the 1000 picofarad and the 470 picofarad. This amp he finds it too harsh. The main difference between that amp and this amp is not the horizontal versus vertical inputs. It's not even the PCB mounted pots and jacks on this one versus the other one. The main difference is this one has one fewer filter node compared to the previous version, the pre-1983. And so this amp has a very different character to its overdrive as a result of having less filtering. All right, so I'm going to remove that C4 temp in. C5 I'll leave disconnected. You can see some of the previous mods I did to increase gain in this amp. Not going to get too far into those other than to say that they are stable and easily reversible. Down here, this red wire, this turret, when I flip the board up to check on those caps and separate the disconnect the 1000 picofarad, that red wire actually broke right there at that turret. And when I heated it up to remove the old wire, so I could redo it, that turret was physically loose. And they're just barely held on to these PCBs to begin with. So when I lift the board up a final time now to correct the caps at the other end, I'll make sure that the solder joints on the bottom of that turret are good and solid, and that won't be an issue in performance. I'm relieved for the owner that all that nasty hum was just a preamp tube. Such is the way of the world these days. And that this amp did not need a lot of work today, because I had done quite a bit of work on it previously, and I always feel bad when it has to come back for yet more stuff. This was a bad preamp tube, a nasty voicing, and an old original wire that snapped. If it had just been the wire, I wouldn't have charged for this.